Fly, envious time, till thou run out thy race. Call on the lazy leaded stepping hours, whose speed is but the heavy plummet's pace, and glut thyself with what thy womb devours, which is no more than what is false and vain and merely mortal dross. So little is our loss, so little is thy gain. For when as each thing bad thou hast entombed, and last of all thy greedy self consumed, then long eternity shall greet our bliss with an individual kiss. And joy shall overtake us as a flood, when everything that is sincerely good and perfectly divine, with truth and peace and love, shall ever shine about the supreme throne of him whose happy making sight alone, when once our heavenly guided soul shall climb. Then all this earthly grossness quit, attired with stars, we shall forever sit, triumphing over death and chance and thee, O time.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Silent Hunter 4, the World War II American submarine simulator, and my favorite installment in the Silent Hunter series. This game was originally published in 2007, and I'm running it here with all of the subsequent updates that came out, and most importantly, the Real Fleetboat mod. Real Fleetboat adds a bunch of new ships and overhauls almost the entire game, adding a huge amount of realism while still being mindful of keeping it fun, which is exactly what I like. I began my career as a sub-sim skipper all the way back in 1987, playing an early Sid Meier game called Silent Service on our Atari as a kid. Silent Service was set in US subs in the Pacific as well, so between my formative experiences with that and my real time in the Navy, I've always been more interested in US subs than U-boats. Very comfortable in them, so that's why I stick with this game, and that's why I'm going to do this series. And of course, as with all my videos, you can expect a lot of research and historical discussion based on things that we're seeing or experiencing. So, with any luck, maybe you'll learn something along the way, or maybe just enjoy hearing again the things that you already know. Most of my general research comes from Wikipedia, because it's a great place to start, but any further references that I use will be linked below in the description. So if you're ever interested in more reading on a subject that I talk about in one of the lectures, make sure to check the description, because there might be additional references there that you might find interesting. Another thing that I do is I operate under the assumption that some people watching this won't be familiar with the game at all. I like to think that I make videos that are for people who like history and not necessarily just players of a particular game. So this first episode is going to be a little bit longer than subsequent ones because we're going to really introduce the game and some of its features, and just, we're going to have a very thorough introductory episode. So just be aware of that. If it starts getting too boring for you, you can look right down at the timeline, and thanks to the chapter markers, you can skip right ahead to the action. But we do have a lot to get through, so it is time now to begin our campaign. American campaign. And we need to rename our captain. And the name I'm going to be choosing to be our captain in this series is going to be Jim Stavridis. Now, Jim Stavridis was not a World War II sub-skipper. What he was an admiral. In fact, he was my admiral on our Persian Gulf deployment in 03 and 04. I have a special place in my heart for Admiral Jim. I rank him up there with my other Navy heroes like Admiral Dan Gallery and Jim Calvert, to name a couple. We had a very troubled chain of command when I was on the Enterprise, and Admiral Jim was one of the few people, even though he wasn't down in the trenches with us dealing with our day-to-day problems, we always felt that he was looking out for us. and we'll talk about him more later, but I'm going to borrow his name as the captain of our sub-series here as a little tip of the hat to old Admiral Jim. Recently retired, by the way, and like I said, we'll talk more about him later and his actual accomplishments, because he is a pretty impressive guy. Next, we have to choose the starting date for the campaign, and for me, I have to go right to the beginning, December 6th, 1941. If I'm playing any sort of campaign in a game, I want to start right from the beginning, and I want the crappiest equipment possible. Because then as you go through time and new inventions come out, in this case, things like radar detectors, torpedoes that actually work, you really have a greater appreciation for them because you've been dealing with the crap beforehand. So that's how I like to play normally. It's even more appropriate here because this is going to be an extended Let's Play series and we're going to go right through the entire war. So I want to be able to present as many classes of sub as possible in the different operating areas. So along that same vein, we next have to choose our base, or more appropriately our fleet. And I'm going to change that from Subpack to Task Force 71, operating out of Manila, Philippines, and later Fremantle, Australia. Now, having selected the Asiatic fleet, we have to choose our submarine class, and we've got 4 options to choose from, but of course I'm going to go right with the S-18 class. Essentially, World War I class boats that were still in operation at the very beginning of the war. Difficulty, I'm going to go with very hard, with a couple of tweaks to sort of customize my playstyle, and we'll see those in a second, and Renown of 0. And if you're not familiar, Renown is basically a type of currency in the game that allows you to buy crew, upgrades, even transfer to other boats, and you earn it based on the amount of tonnage that you sink. So we'll sort of see that mechanic in play. And that's it, the campaign is set up. Let's get underway and get assigned to our first command. December 7th, 1941, from Commander Submarine Force, Task Force 3.51.71, Cavite Naval Base, Manila, Philippines. To Lieutenant Commander Jim Stavridis, Commanding Officer USS S-38, SS-143, your boat and crew have completed training and are now ready for combat operations. Review your enclosed operations order and make your boat and crew ready for sea.
Gentlemen, as you already know, we are at war. I quote the President of the United States. Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. The attack has effectively eliminated our entire battleship force for the time being. As a consolation, it has failed to catch any of our aircraft carriers in port, while the submarines and fuel reserves have escaped unharmed. During the past years, the Japanese military was engaged in a seemingly endless war against China, badly needing oil and other raw materials. Since we halted the trade with Japan, they schemed to seize the oil and mineral-rich East Indies and Southeast Asia. A Japanese attack into the Indies, Malaya, and the Philippines was expected, and plans prepared for it. But obviously, we have not prepared enough for an attack of this magnitude. The attack against Malaya has materialized yesterday, and last night the Japanese forces also attacked Hong Kong, Guam, the Philippines, and Wake Island. This morning, the Japanese continued with an attack on Midway. The Japanese offensive is extending throughout the Pacific, with the submarine force left mostly to itself. We need to act accordingly. For the time being, we will conduct operations as follows. Boats based in Pearl Harbor will patrol in Japanese home waters and also reconnoiter the Marshall Islands, as it's presumed that Japanese forces are massing in that archipelago for a second attack on our bases. Manila-based boats will deploy to guard the vital island of Luzon against approach by enemy forces. Individual patrol orders will be received from your commander.
Welcome to the Philippines. Now, I don't know if you've heard, but there's a war on. We've got work to do, so we need to get our sub and our crew ready to go, ready to depart and head out for our first combat patrol. First stop is going to be our gameplay settings, just to review that. People always seem to be curious about what difficulty I'm playing the games on. So here you can see basically everything is checked as on. So we have limited batteries, compressed air, fuel, realistic repair times, dud torpedoes, realistic reloads, no event camera, realistic sensors. The main two important things, I guess maybe three if you're really hardcore, manual targeting system is checked on. So this says, when selected, you must enter the appropriate information into the TDC, which is the torpedo data computer. When firing torpedoes, you cannot simply point the TBT or periscope at a target and fire. It was said that a World War II submarine was only as good as its TDC operator, and so that's going to be me in this case. That's going to add a certain amount of uncertainty to firing torpedoes, which makes the hits so much sweeter when you actually get middle of the target, perfect shot. So that is on. We do not have no map contact update. I'm leaving all the map contacts on. The Real Fleetboat mod deletes most of the contacts on the map anyways, especially when you're zoomed in, so we're just going to leave that off. And then finally, no external view. I'm not going to turn that off either. So there we have it. Realism, according to the game, is 100. Okay, let's take a look at our sub itself here. So here we have our S-class Holland-type S-boat, the USS S-38, and you can see she's equipped with a 4-inch 50 cal gun up on the forward deck there, and no surface search radar, no available upgrades in any of the three categories: weapons, sensors, or mechanical. So that's it. There's nothing else we can add to the ship right now. Here is our crew. The crew is split into 3 watch sections, standing a rotation of 4 1/8. That's 4 hours on, 8 hours off. The sub is split into 5 primary compartments, 3 secondary compartments. There would also be additional personnel, non-combat personnel who are not shown here, which would include cooks, stewards, and yeomen. Now, as far as watch rotations go, 4 1/8 is not too bad. 4-hour watches can fly by, especially if you're keeping yourself occupied. 5-hour watches can be tedious, and 6 hours are interminable. They just go on forever. The 8 hours that you have off isn't really off. You're expected to do your maintenance and collateral duties during those times, so you really end up getting like 4 to 5 hours of sleep. You also, of course, have to eat and bathe yourself during those times, so life at sea quickly becomes quite monotonous, and you very easily fall into the swing of the schedule because there's not much else to do. Admiral Daniel Gallery used to write in his books that being out to sea condensed the week down to 3 days, and that's yesterday, today, and tomorrow. We have nearly a full complement of men aboard. You'll notice a couple of openings here. Here in the sensors station, the empty slots are for the radar operator. Since we don't have any radars yet, there's no point in bringing anybody on board to stand that watch because there's no equipment for them. The other men on watch in that compartment man the passive and active sonars, listening through the hydrophones. Then we've got a chief petty officer in charge of the whole department. Forward torpedo room, I think those guys are pretty self-explanatory. We have torpedo men and gunner's mates who load and fire the torpedo tubes and the deck gun. They also perform maintenance on torpedoes. The main deck is where the officer of the deck and the lookouts stand watch when the sub is surfaced. They, of course, come below when it submerges. The OOD is the head watch stander for his watch team, and he's in charge of the entire boat, directly under the captain when he's on watch. Here in the control room, we've got 2 spaces open, and those are the fore and aft dive planesmen. They're open because when the sub does submerge, the watchstanders come down off of the bridge, off the main deck, and 2 of the lookouts take their stations on the bow planes. So when we have to rig the ship for dive or for depth charging, I'm going to manually move those watchstanders off the main deck and down into the control room. Now the OOD should also, the officer should also actually move down into the control room because he would still be in charge of the boat. Because the game wasn't specifically designed to do this, this is a feature of the Real Fleetboat implementation. It doesn't quite work. So we do have an officer in charge in the control room right now, even though the officer of the deck is actually the guy who's up on the bridge there with the lookout watch team. But in the later subs, there's more slots in the control room, so I'll maybe add the officer into one of the other, like the navigator's position or something down in the control room. Any extra watchstanders from the main deck can be placed in Hogan's Alley, which is sort of a protected space within the hull of the ship, where they just hang out and they'll be protected from damage from bombs, depth charges, or small arms fire. And of course, most importantly, the heart of the submarine, the guys in the main propulsion plant. These are the heroes of the Navy, the machinist mates. And they keep the lights on and the boat moving, and without them, nothing could be possible. They are in charge of running, maintaining the diesel engines, electric motors, everything dealing with the propulsion plant. So actually there would be EMs back here too, electricians mates, and maybe a couple of other rates that I'm not thinking of. Enginemen, maybe? Maybe they're back there too. But anyways, I think maybe you can tell what rate I was in the Navy. So the crew looks good. Let's see, we don't need to bring on board any further guys. We have no medals available, no promotions available. So let's take a look at our final things, the torpedoes. We have a full torpedo load on board, ready to go. Forward torpedoes only. No aft torpedoes. There was no room because of the rudder and engine arrangement on the Holland-type S-boats, and you can see there that axial rudder mounted on the back of the ship. There's no space for an aft torpedo tube, so there were none. Only the S-38 class S-boats were built with an aft torpedo tube, and the S-3 class, what was referred to as the Bureau class of S-boats, they were later retrofitted with a single aft torpedo tube. But the handful of S-48 boats were the only ones actually built with that aft tube. Now, these are Mark 10 torpedoes. Like our boat itself, these are World War I vintage torpedoes. Range of 3,500 yards. They have a single speed of 36 knots. They have a wet heater propulsion unit and an impact detonator. Now, this is important because we do not even have the option for a magnetic detonator in these fellers, which is great because the magnetic detonators of the Mark 14s were extremely unreliable for a significant portion of the war. And we don't have to worry about any of that. We just set these guys to run medium deep to just hit somewhere between the waterline and the keel and, do as much damage as possible that way. Arming distance is 140 yards minimum. We have a gyro angle of plus or minus 90 degrees. Now that's important because that means that we can't shoot at targets offset further than our beam, our 3 or 9 o'clock. So, although I very rarely make shots like that anyways, just something to keep in mind that if a ship is tracking to be beyond that 90-degree mark, then I'm going to have to reposition the sub or not fire. And the reason that we have to use the Mark 10s and we don't have any other option is because the S-boat torpedo tubes were too short to accommodate the newer Mark 14 and later torpedoes. So that's why we have to use these things, for better or for worse. Okay, everything looks good. S-38 and crew report loaded and ready to get underway. So let's receive our mission orders now. To Jim Stavridis, USS S-38. Depart on December 8th, 1941. Proceed at best speed to Lingayen Gulf and conduct combat patrol within 50 nautical miles of its center point for a minimum of 72 hours. If no contact with the IJN, that's Imperial Japanese Navy, units proceed at best speed to the Luzon Straits and conduct combat operations for an additional 72 hours. Additional direction may be provided via message traffic. Make daily reports as necessary to Task Force 3. Objective, patrol the Lingayen Gulf. And you can see that's the star there on the map is just north of Manila. It's actually a small gulf on the west side of the Philippines there of Luzon. And this is because Japanese forces have already landed on the north side of the island. So we need to be on the lookout for any additional landing or supply forces maybe coming onto the island. Here we get our first real look at the S-38. The old girl's about 22 years old at this point. And we head up the conning tower to the bridge. We're going to get into position and order the ship underway. Here's the officer of the deck, standing next to the bridge helm. The engine order telegraph Right over here, let's order ahead 1/3 on the engines.
Yes, sir. Ahead 1/3. Yes, sir.
The Nelseco engines spring to life and begin pushing us out to sea for our first combat patrol.
Ahead slow. Yes, sir.
Passing thermal layer.
Up to 2/3 now as we're creeping away from the dock, and we're going to take a look at the map here and mark a path on out of Manila, out into the open sea to head up to our patrol area just to the north here. Not too far at all.
Passing thermal layer.
Getting spurious calls for passing a thermal layer. Obviously we are
Passing
not since
thermal
we're
layer.
surfaced, but the temperature gradient must be right near the surface of the water. Let's head down the hatch through the superstructure down into the command room. Now, from everything I've read, as far as I can tell, the conning tower on these S-boats were basically just passageways. There was nothing in them. They were just spaces with air for buoyancy, to maintain the buoyancy of the ship. But there was no equipment or any sort of command room in there, as there will be on later fleet boats. So here's our command room in the center. We have our chart table and the officer of the deck. Again, in real life, he would be the officer that's up with the watch-standing team on the bridge, and when they would come down, he would take his place there at the chart table or somewhere nearby, and then he would still be in command of the boat. Additionally, 2 of those lookouts up on the bridge would take their stations here on the dive controls. We have fore and aft hydraulically powered wheels leading to the dive planes. And we have 2 depth gauges. We have the shallow water on the right from 15 to 165 feet. We have the deep water on the left going all the way to 450, which is well beyond the crush depth of this particular sub. Test depth for all the S-class types was 200 feet, so given the built-in design safety factor, the sub could probably make it down to 250, maybe 300 feet safely, maybe even beyond that, but honestly, I haven't tested the limits that far before. Back here in the port aft corner of the control room, we have the gauges and the manifold for the trim and ballast tanks. And this is sort of a generic element for the game, because these were not here in real life, at least from the pictures of the S-boats I've seen. Now again, it's sort of hard to really know where things were without doing a super deep dive, because each of the 6 subclasses of the S-boats probably had, well, definitely 3 of them had different control center setups. But none that I've seen so far mentions having the manifold back here. I think it was actually forward of the dive planes. There was something else here. There's different equipment. On some of the S-boats, this is where the radio equipment, or the radio room, was located, was here in the port aft corner. I've seen pictures where it looks like it's on the starboard aft corner on the other side of the room. So, again, differences between some of the written material and pictures prove that all of the subclasses of ships were slightly different, and things were mixed around sort of here and there wherever they could fit it. In the center of the aft of the command room, we have our 2 periscopes here. These are the attack and observer periscopes, and on later subs, the attack periscope heads were designed to be minimally visible while they were on the surface, so that it wouldn't tip off an enemy ship that they were under attack. In this case, on this boat, they're both the same heads. They're interchangeable. I think maybe the attack scope sticks out of the water slightly higher, so when both scopes are out, it clears over the top of the observer scope, but no real difference between the 2 here on this boat. Moving forward on the starboard side, we've got more manifolds, gauges. Here are the radar stations for air and surface search radar, which are not installed, so this case would not be here, and obviously there's no crewman manning it at the moment. But just forward of that is our hydrophone, so there's our sonar tech manning the passive sonars as they swing around. This rugged chap is our helmsman, and he faces forward along the center line of the ship. He's got a gauge cluster that includes the gyro compass, engine order telegraphs for the port and starboard engines. Speed in knots is right in the center between those 2. Underneath that is our rudder position indicator, and to the right of that are RPM gauges. More modern fleet boats have 4 diesel engines, so you'd get 4 gauges. We should only have 2 here, because there's only 2 engines aboard this ship. 2 Nel-Seco direct drive diesel engines. Direct drive means that a shaft runs directly from the diesels to the propeller with nothing in between other than passing through a generator/motor. Nel-Seco engines were very bad copies of German U-boat engines from World War I that were licensed to other countries, and they were nothing but trouble for most of the years they operated. When they did manage to run smoothly, the Nel-Secos put out 600 horsepower each for a max RPM of 380. So the whole idea behind EOTs, or engine order telegraphs, is it's a way for the bridge, or in this case the helmsman, to be able to relay non-verbal signals back to maneuvering to the people who actually control the engines and RPM, and therefore the speed of the ship. So you see the small knobs underneath the gauges. The operator reaches up and moves the knob to change his colored pointer on the EOT to the desired speed that he wants. This rings a bell, getting the attention of the people back in maneuvering. They acknowledge the order by turning their own handle and moving a second colored pointer. Usually it's red and white or something, 2 very distinct colors. They put their pointer on the same speed or RPM number that has been ordered, and then they go and they operate their equipment as necessary. Here on the forward port side, we have the hull opening indicator light panel, more commonly referred to as the Christmas tree because of its red and green lights. This indicates the condition of hull openings, vents, and flood valves. So any hatches that are open, any vents that are open, they will appear as red lights. So you don't want to dive until you have a green board. Green means go, and that all the openings that might let water into the ship have been closed. Down underneath we have some quick actuating knife switch style valves for the high pressure air system. This is the air manifold for the trim and ballast system. S-boats had 2 air compressors located back in the motor room, and they had 6 banks of storage flasks for high pressure air, split between the forward torpedo room and the engine room back aft. These held just over 273 cubic feet worth of compressed air, held at 2,800 pounds, so extremely high pressure air. But of course, you need that to be able to push out tons of seawater when you're down at a depth, you know, where the pressure of the sea is pushing in on you, so you got to overcome that. So 2,800 pounds is the high pressure air system for the ballast. Okay, we've completed our turn and we are clear of the inner harbor, so I'm going to bring us up to cruise speed, which is 9.5 knots in this particular ship. We'll make 8,950 miles on 9.5 knots. So let's bring up our controls here and issue some orders to our crew. We've got the EOT over on the left here with our standard speeds forward and aft, ranging from flank to all stop on the right. And if we click the button, then we can assign specific speeds. And we're going to do that now, and we'll order up 9.5 knots. Bring, bring! Come on, starboard set to bring, bring! Okay, there we go. So we've set head 2/3, 9.5 knots, making turns for 9.5. Cavite Naval Base out to our port side. They're out in the distance, and that's along the south side of the bay, southwest of Manila. Okay, it is 1:30 in the afternoon. We've been out to sea for 5 hours now. We're clear of Manila Bay in deep water, so it's time for our very first dive. So I'm moving 2 of the watchstanders off the main deck down onto the bow planes stations in the command room, and we'll order periscope depth.
Sir. Periscope depth. Yes, sir.
Dive, dive.
Alright, bow planes unfolded out of their safety lockers there on the superstructure. And the boat's taking on water and slipping underneath the waves. Christmas tree should switch over. There we go. All green lights, all vents and hatches are closed. Boat is secure. And as those vents and flapper valves come shut, we secure the diesel engines and switch over to the electrics. So we have a few seconds of coasting, and we'll listen for the electric motors to come online, and there they are. We're now under electric power. 40 feet, coming down to 60 for periscope depth, and things are looking nice and level and in control, which is wonderful. It's what we want to see. Just past 50 feet there. And let's bring up the scope and take a look around. Things are still looking clear, which of course they should be. We were just on the surface, but taking a look at what our scope actually can see here, and we've got all of our torpedo firing and programming controls up on the left and right sides, and we'll get into this in more detail when we actually need to use them. So this is the attack scope in back, and if we press this button that'll go down. We can bring up the observer scope, which, like I said before, the two scopes here are basically interchangeable. Other than, I think the height of the attack scope is slightly higher than the observer scope. But other than that, you don't actually have any sort of magnification differences or shape differences that you will get with later. The heads of the attack scope are physically different. And you can see here as it moseys by, when it's sticking out of the water, I mean, it's not like it's super big, but they did try to minimize the thickness of the attack scopes so they would not be able to be seen by sharp-eyed observers. So we're down here just at 50 feet, and you can see on a nice clear day, even submerged, the sub is actually quite visible to any passing airplanes who are looking down. So that's something to keep in mind in this game, is that enemy pilots in passing recon or any aircraft can actually see us up to depths of even 100, 150 feet sometimes. So you can see the red line over here on the depth gauge is telling us that test depth is at 200 feet. So let's take her right down to that line. Let's order up 190 feet. Yes, sir. And we'll bring her deep, and we'll take a look at the surface, yes, maybe sir, even just to show you what it looks like.
Current depth 80.
I mean, you can see the sub is still quite visible. We're just coming up on 100 feet in a moment here.
Current depth 100.
This is why it's a bad idea to cruise close to the surface but not have any sort of periscope up. You're blind to whatever's in the sky, and if it's a nice enough day, someone's going to be able to see you, and you'll get an unexpected bomb dropped right on you. And I have lost several subs in this game from that very thing happening. So if I'm going to run submerged and not have the scopes up, then I go right down to a minimum of 150 feet. If it's choppy seas or poor weather, that cuts the visibility right down. You can get away with being much closer to the surface, but always a good idea to just avoid it if possible. Over in the back corner here by the water manifold, we've got our ship's clock, and we have all of our gauges for main ballast tanks. These are generic. These are not pertaining specifically to S-class boats. S-boats had 3 main ballast tanks with a total capacity of 178 tons of seawater. They had 2 trimming tanks and an auxiliary tank that held an additional 51 tons of water. Back here in the corner we've got the trim meter, which is showing thousands of pounds of seawater. I'm not sure exactly what this is telling us, but I suspect that it's maybe some sort of total amount of seawater on board in the trim tanks. Anyone who can explain in detail what that's really for, please be my guest. Let me know.
Current depth 160.
Passing 160 feet now. If we come back here to the aft starboard side, we've got a little battle lantern here. These are emergency lights. If we lose power, you got battery-operated lanterns that are either affixed to the walls or you can take them off and hold them by hand. And the water is looking pretty dark as we get down lower and lower, closer to 200 feet. Coming up on 180. You can see the trim meter has slowly increased, so while it is sort of decorative, the gauge is actually moving. We're coming up on 4,000 pounds of seawater, so whatever that actually means, I don't know. This gauge goes up to 16,000 pounds, and that doesn't match any of the tank capacities in the trim system or the ballast system. The only thing it could be, I guess, would be the aft trim tank, because that's got a capacity of 11,000 pounds. So, could be that. I think most likely it's probably just decorative. Okay, we've reached 190 feet, our dive target, and everything has looked good. It's been a successful dive. Everyone seems to know what they're doing, so what I'm going to do now is bring us back to the surface. We're going to practice an emergency surface. That's where we use that high-pressure 2,800 psi air to blow all the water out of the ballast tanks, increasing our buoyancy and rocketing us back up to the surface.
Yes, sir.
Not a procedure to be used all the time, but if we're deep and taking water, we got to be able to push the water out of the ballast tanks faster than it's coming into the compartment, so we can get back up to the surface and control flooding. Dive planes are full up. We've commanded flank speed on the motors, and we've blown all of the ballast water out of the tanks. So you can see our depth is just shooting back up, and the pitch of the ship is going nose high as we scream back towards the surface. And there we go, breaching, breaking water, conning tower, and the bow coming right out of the water, and we are back on the surface. Successful dive. I have great confidence in the crew now. We are ready for action. So let's move our dive planesmen back to their lookout stations up on the bridge. And then if we pull them out, we go back to the command room. You can see the men have been removed because they're up top now.
Yes, sir. Ahead,
And we'll bring the ship back down to cruise speed. Again, that's 9.5 knots. Nothing to do now but settle into the routine of being out at sea for the next day or so as we make our way up the western coast to our patrol zone. We are on board the USS S-38, somewhat confusingly assigned the hull number of SS-143, built in the Mare Island shipyards of California in 1919. She was officially commissioned in 1924, under the command of Lieutenant Clifford Roper. She was assigned to the Asiatic Fleet and operated out of the Philippines for the next 17 years, conducting patrols around China and the Southwest Pacific. In June of 1940, the S-38 completed her last patrol to China, and the following year participated in exercises and war games around the Philippines. The sub was in port when the attack on Pearl Harbor occurred and the U.S. declared war on Japan. Under command of Reeford Chapel, S-38 left for her first combat patrol right away. Her first kill came just a few days later on December 11th, but was a mistaken sinking of a Norwegian freighter named Hydra II. The Hydra, en route from Bangkok to Hong Kong with 2,000 tons of rice and salt, heard the declaration of war over the radio and decided to change course for the nearest island, which was Luzon. During the afternoon of the 11th, she was stopped by 2 British destroyers, who advised the crew to continue to Manila to take on provisions and decide what steps to take next. The Japanese had already landed on Luzon 2 days earlier, and the situation on the island was confusing and rapidly degrading. With Japanese troops fighting their way to Manila, the Hydra anchored 2 miles offshore and doused all her lights, waiting for morning to enter the harbor. She had only been there for 40 minutes when the S-38 came upon them and fired, mistaking them for a Japanese auxiliary ship. The torpedo hit at 21:40, and the Hydra sank in less than 2 minutes. The captain, first mate, first engineer, and 38 of the Chinese crew were killed. Only 3 Norwegian officers and 6 Chinese crewmen lived to be rescued by the Swedish merchant Columbia. They had been floating in a debris field for 14 hours. The S-38, meanwhile, unaware of what she'd done, continued her patrol to Lingayen Gulf, the same spot we've been ordered to here in the game. There she engaged a Japanese convoy, then blew up the Heo Maru, anchored in the Gulf. She spent the next 2 days being depth-charged and bombed, grounding on the muddy bottom of the bay for much of the time. In the evening of Christmas Day, the S-38 finally surfaced to head back south and charge her batteries. Her aft battery was not vented properly and exploded after only 5 minutes of charging, wiping out her port engine. 5 hours later, 3 more Japanese destroyers found her, and another day of depth charges followed. After maneuvering on one engine, S-38 grounded again, hoping to lose her attackers. The destroyers circled for over 2 hours before finally leaving the area. The sub limped back into Manila at 21:45 on December 26th, with 1 kill and 1 friendly fire. She continued making patrols through 1942, operating out of Java for a short time, before transferring with all the Asiatic S-boats to Brisbane, Australia. She sunk her second and final Japanese freighter on August 8, 1942. In September, all S-boats were recalled to the United States for overhauls and upgrades. S-38 spent the rest of the war in the South Pacific as an anti-sub warfare training unit, until she was decommissioned in December of 1944 in San Diego. On February 20th, 1945, she was sunk as a target in a bombing exercise. The S-38 served for 26 years, sunk 2 ships for 11,000 tons, and was awarded the Yangtze Service Medal, the China Service Medal, American Defense Service Medal, the World War II Victory Medal, and the Asiatic Pacific Campaign Medal with 3 battle stars.
Relieve the watch.
Okay, it's 5:39 in the morning on December 9th, 1941, so it's been about 21 hours since we left port, and we are nearly at our patrol area. We've just received some radio messages. So, Monday, December 8th, Britain declares war on Japan. President Roosevelt called December 7th a day that will live in infamy. The casualty list after the attack on Pearl Harbor includes 2,335 servicemen and 68 civilians killed, with a further 1,178 wounded. This includes the 1,104 men aboard the battleship USS Arizona killed after a bomb penetrated the forward magazine, causing catastrophic explosions. Down here, I believe this is the message that just came through from Com Sub PAC. Actually, we'd be getting our orders from Com Sub BAF, because the Asiatic Fleet was its own entity apart from the Pacific Fleet. That's just a fun historical note, doesn't really matter. Conduct patrol in the Lingayen Gulf for the next 72 hours within 50 nautical miles of the center point. So if we grab my compass here, and we'll draw out a 50-mile radius. There we go. So this is the approximate area that we should be patrolling in. So we'll use our plotting device here, and we'll set up a little patrol route around the outskirts of the Gulf. And I'm staying outside of the Gulf for the moment, just because I don't like the idea of being trapped in there in case something goes down. The chart is showing that there's fairly deep water, but I don't know. I just don't want to get stuck in there if I don't have to. So we're going to stay on the outside for the moment, and we'll be on the lookout for any Japanese ships transiting in or out of that Gulf. The S-38 was one of 51 S-class submarines built just after World War I and commissioned between 1920 and 1925. The S-class is unusual in that it was actually a collection of 6 very different subclasses of ships built from 4 different manufacturers. The Navy classed them together because they were all designed to meet the same performance specifications, but they were not at all identical like we would think of a normal class of ship. This odd collection of designs came from the Navy's experiment in trying to get away from relying on a single contractor to build their submarines, namely Electric Boat in Groton, Connecticut. Electric Boat had been founded specifically to build the Navy's first submarines in 1900. The Navy wanted to move away from the practice of letting the contractor decide the operating specs of a design and then being forced to accept expensive and subpar ships. Instead, the Navy's General Board for Design issued a set of characteristics that it wanted a new class of sub to have, and gave several builders the task of designing boats that would compete to meet those specs. The Navy also wanted to have its own in-house design firm and designated Portsmouth Naval Shipyard in Kittery, Maine, as their center for submarine design. 3 designs came in to meet the requirements of a new 800-ton submarine from Electric Boat, Portsmouth Yard, and Lake Torpedo Boat Company of Bridgeport, Connecticut. The 3 prototypes were named the S1 through the S3. S1 was Electric Boat's model, known as the Holland-type of S-boat. The Hollands had several unique design features. It was a single-hull design, with all of its ballast tanks located within the pressure hull. The 3-inch deck gun partially retracted into the superstructure to reduce drag, and was the first ship to have bow planes that folded into the hull. The battery was split into 2 sections, fore and aft, which was a well-liked safety feature of earlier electric boat designs. The Holland type had good underwater maneuverability, was a fast diver for the times, and was easy to maintain. On the downside, it didn't have enough surface buoyancy and often had wet decks and bridge, making gunnery a problem. More troubling, though, were its engines, which would be a nightmare for years. After World War I, the German engine company, MAN, licensed their U-boat engines to navies all over the world. Nel Secco, or New London Ship and Engine Company, was the Electric Boat-owned subsidiary that leased the MANs for U.S. use. The Nel Secco engines were unreliable and generally hated by everyone, and though the problems were eventually mostly worked out, Nel Secco was dissolved as a company after S-boat construction ended in 1925. Despite its engine troubles, the Holland type was well liked and adopted by the Navy, and after a few tweaks, such as uprating to a 4-inch deck gun, is the type that we are sailing here today. The Hollands are recognizable by the knife edge on the aft end of the deck, a fishtail rudder, and the angled slots of the bow planes. The second prototype, the S2, was the Lake Torpedo Boat design. It had a single battery compartment forward of the conning tower, giving it a long nose appearance. Its rudder, stern planes, and propeller shafts were all mounted under the stern, unlike the S1's axial-mounted rudder. The design had excellent surface buoyancy, but its shape tended to plow into waves, also resulting in wet decks. A bow buoyancy tank was added, giving the prow a uniquely bulbous look. The S2 was not a success overall, and she was the only ship of her design built. Her added buoyancy made her a slow diver and poor underwater handler. Her systems were overly complicated, and the interior was cramped. She was never liked by her crews, and though accepted for commission by the Navy, she served only 9 years before being scrapped. This was the last sub-design submitted by the Lake Company, though they were contracted to build several of the other S-boat classes. After the delivery of their last boat, the S-51, the company folded in 1924. The S-3, or Bureau design, was the government effort out of Portsmouth Naval Yard. It was the first completely Navy-designed boat, and overall it was a good effort, falling in the middle between the other 2 designs. The Bureau design was a double-hulled boat, with ballast tanks located between the pressure hull and the outer superstructure. S3 was longer and wider than the other boats, giving her much more visually pleasing lines than the stubby S1. With her rudder and props also positioned under the stern, the S3 is clearly the forerunner to the familiar shape of U.S. fleet submarines that would come within the next decade. Performance-wise, the S-3 was a slow diver and a wide turner, and the double hull was difficult for maintenance. But the S-3 had greater range than the S-1, and her engines were better. Overall, the Navy considered them evenly matched and accepted both designs for further construction. In the end, 25 Holland-type S-class subs were built, known as Group 1. After the S-1, the rest of the ships were S-18 through S-41. Construction was split between Quincy, Massachusetts, and San Francisco, California. No other S-2 boats were made. Group 2 was the Bureau type, and 15 boats were split between the Portsmouth Navy Yard and Lake Torpedo Boat in Connecticut. Group 3 was an upgraded Holland design called the S-42 class. These 6 boats, built in Quincy beginning in 1920, were slightly longer than the Group 1 boats to hold 17 more tons of fuel. Improved Nel-Secco engines gave a slightly higher surface speed. Group 4 was an upgraded Bureau design called the S-48 class. These 4 boats were the ones subcontracted to Lake Torpedo Boat and built in Bridgeport. Almost 10 feet longer than Group 2 boats, S-48s held 29 more tons of oil and used Bush-Sulzer engines. Bush-Sulzer, co-founded by the same Adolphus Bush of the Anheuser-Busch Brewing Company, was an engine firm out of St. Louis that the Lake Company used since 1916. The S-48s had a range of 8,000 miles, 3,000 more than the Group 2s. They also sported a single aft torpedo tube, something the Holland types couldn't fit because of their rudder arrangement. Of the 51 total S-class subs, 37 were still in service on December 7, 1941. They went on to sink a total of 42 Japanese ships. 6 subs were lost during the war, 5 to accidents. Only the S-44 was lost to enemy action in combat. 6 subs were transferred to the British Navy for training purposes in 1941 and 42. 11 S-boats, including our own S-38, were decommissioned prior to Japan's surrender and sunk as targets. The 13 remaining boats were decommissioned by November of 1945, 3 months after the end of the war. There are no surviving examples left today. December 11th. Now, we've been patrolling out here for 2 days. It's 6:36 at night, and I've just made some contact with some ships out nearby, so we're going to investigate them. Hearing the hydrophones, looking around. There we go, we've got some sounds. Out there bearing at 310, between 300 and 310. And it sounds like multiple contacts. Yeah, you can hear some slow beating screws in there and some fast ones. So I think we've got maybe a full convoy, but definitely 1 or 2 cargo ships, maybe with some escorts, unfortunately. But
Contact.
yeah, we're just going to mark them so we can keep track of them on the map.
327. Long range. Contact. Merchant. Closing. Bearing. 3-1.
Not very exact, but we'll just mark another one. Those sound like fast screws. Let's mark them as a warship. There we go. So they're marked on the map. They're up here. They're up to our northeast. And we are turning hard to port, heading north. I don't know if I actually want to do that now, because they might be heading south into the Gulf.
Yes,
so you know what? Let's just straighten out.
7-4. Yes, sir.
We'll head slightly north of east, because I'm going to assume that they're probably coming down into the Gulf. So we're still at periscope depth at the moment. Let's see if I can spot them from here. And if not, it may be dark enough to go ahead and surface. And then we'll try to close on them and see what we're dealing with here. So this is 340 3, 4, 5. They should be out there somewhere. And I mean, it's hard to see in the dark anyways. Oh, you know what? There might be... I think that's a lump right there. I think there's a ship. Alright, let's go up to the surface and see what we can see.
Surface, surface, surface.
Out to sea, the horizon line is about 3 nautical miles away, or roughly 6,000 yards. Any targets beyond that are going to be partially or completely hidden by the curvature of the Earth, so distant targets we might only see mast tops. Yeah, I got something right there at 345. Very, very faint in the dark, but it sort of looks like a ship coming towards us.
Yes, sir. Ahead full. Yes, sir.
Bringing her up to full speed. We got to figure out which direction these guys are going and see if we can maneuver into position for a good shot. So let's use the ruler to just sort of generally mark the area. We won't be able to track them with the hydrophones unless we dive again.
Yes, sir. New course. 5, 4. Yes, sir.
There, I've brought the nose around, so whatever this ship is almost
Yes, sir.
dead ahead, 12 o'clock,
Yes, sir.
and we'll see which way they're going to be moving, either coming towards us or moving off to the left or right. That'll at least give us an idea of which way they're moving. And I'll bring up the sighting guide ahead of time, our recognition manual, so that we can be ready to ID these things. Alright, I've pumped up the kicks to flank speed for a little bit to try to close this distance a little bit faster, but you gotta be wary about that, because the faster we're going, the bigger bow wake we are putting up, and even in the dark, that white water can be seen from far away. Okay, lookouts have reported a warship spotted out ahead of us. This may or may not be the one that I was tracking. He was a little north of that reference line, so let's mark him on the map and see which way he's moving. It looks like either due south or slightly southwest. We'll keep an eye on him and update that as we go. Oh, look at this! No, look, we've got definitely have an escort out to the right, and I see at least 2 big old ships. Look at that! Is that a liner or a troop ship? Holy shit. Okay, we gotta report this convoy, because this is definitely a big convoy, and we've got some heavy hitters out there. Looked like a massive tanker and some sort of troop type ship. Several escorts. They don't look like full destroyers, though. They might just be sub-chasers. Yeah, look at that old girl. She's a biggin'. Let's see what we're dealing with here. Large old passenger carrier. That might be her. 2 stacks. Sort of a swept-up nose. Let's call her that for now until we see something that changes my mind. What's this girl? Looks like 4 masts. A large central stack. Figures I found this freaking convoy at night. Can hardly see anything.
Yes,
All right,
sir.
let's slow back down so our bow wake does not give us away. This sort of looks like maybe what we're looking at. Large modern composite freighter. 7,000 tons. Yeah, I'm looking at the aft superstructure. over the stern, and it sort of looks like maybe what we've got. So we've identified at least 2 major targets. With our Mark 10 torpedoes, we're not going to be taking a butt-ton of shots here. So let's see, let's mark that thing. I think that's the composite freighter. And actually, yeah, we're gonna monitor him with the marks. I'm just gonna erase this other one because I don't really care about the escorts. They tend to zigzag around anyways, so they're not gonna give us the true course necessarily of yikes of the convoy. Yeah, look at this guy. He's awfully close. Let's try to deflect off him a little bit. Now the good news is that it is pitch black and it's early enough in the war that there should be almost no Japanese surface ships that have radars that are going to be able to detect us. Okay, we're getting a message in from headquarters. Roger, your contact report. If fuel and weapons permit, maneuver into position and engage the IGN units. Sounds like a plan. Modern composite is 7,100 tons. Let's compare that to the ocean liner.
Ship spotted. Bearing 4-2. All range.
There we go. Modern passenger liner, 6,300 tons. So it'll be slightly less, but I think the higher value target is going to be any sort of troop transport. So I'm going to try to go for this, but we do have a secondary target of that large composite freighter. If we have to identify other things as we go, we can, but let's start setting some depths on torpedoes here. I'm setting them 5 feet shallower than the keel depth. The recognition manual, by the way, I'd like to point out, is not 100% accurate, as it wasn't in real life. They tried to get their best possible information together, but both sides went out of their way to change mast heights and do different things that would, that would mess up any sort of recorded numbers that the other side could use to determine distance or tonnage or draft. Any of those things that are so important for us doing what we're trying to do right now. Sometimes naval intelligence had good information, and sometimes they were just estimating, doing the best they could. So yeah, so this is telling us a max speed of 19 knots, a draft of 20 feet, and she's definitely moving right to left. So we'll estimate 40. Let's knock it down to 30 degrees, and then we're going to start tracking her distance here and marking it on the map. Estimated speed is 18 knots at 231. That would be just under her max of 19. I don't think that's accurate, but we'll plug it in for the moment and then we'll adjust as necessary. There's that escort. Right off our 3 o'clock. 85,085 degrees.
Ahead flank!
Let's punch it back up to flank so I can just avoid running into him. We'll go, once we're on the other side of him a little bit, once we're closer to the track of these merchants here, we'll slow back down. I want to get within 1,000 yards, preferably, of their track to fire, and you can see we're probably still like 3,000 yards out, so...
New course, 270. Yes, sir.
I don't want to submerge just yet. I mean, it's nighttime. Standard nighttime practice is to make surfaced torpedo attacks. I'm not seeing a moon out just yet, so hopefully we're nice and dark and we'll stay hidden from their lookouts. Let's identify what this guy is. He's definitely a smaller escort class. Of course, the OOD is right in the way. We're going to cheat a little bit and just center on the ship. Let's click through. What do we got here? It's a torpedo boat. Minesweeper? Nope. Yugumo destroyer. That Maybe he's got... I'm looking for slanted double stacks where the front stack's a little bit thicker than the aft stack. Oh, there we go. Kagero. It's got the boat, the lifeboat right there over the first stack. I think that's a... Yeah, 2 lifeboats. I think those are good identifying features. I think we have our class of ship. So it is actually a destroyer. It's a 2,500-ton Kagero destroyer just off our starboard side. We're up to 12 knots. Heading due west. Sort of angled away from that escort. So he doesn't get too close before I can move in on the main ships, which are also out to my right. Where'd they go? There they are. They're in the aft quarter. OOD is in the way again. We can just move over. Up to 13 knots now. This guy is giving me the heebie-jeebies. He's seesawing back and forth. I wish he would make that turn to port and just drop down behind us. I'm very, very reticent to slow down right now, even though the danger is they might see us with the bow wake. If I slow down, they might run into me. And if I dive, there's the possibility that they'll hear us on the sonobuoys. Or not sonobuoys, on the hydrophones. So I'm taking a calculated risk. If you take a gamble and you win, it was a calculated risk, and you look like a genius. And if you lose, then you're an idiot. That's how it goes, but... Maintaining 13 knots. Let's measure this guy's distance again. On merchant ships, we use the tallest mast as a reference point to try to calculate their distance. Warships, we use the top of the tallest funnel, and aircraft carriers use the flight deck. So 3 different reference points for different types of ships. And in real life, the merchants, they actually used several reference points. Like I said, because the Japanese tried to change their mast height just to throw off those measurements. You would take a couple of different reference points based on how many decks you saw above the water and estimating that height and all sorts of stuff like that. Okay, here's that destroyer out behind us. I think we're pulling away from him. He has clearly not seen us yet, and he's just chopping back and forth in the water. Looks like he's beginning a turn back to port. That's good. I just want to put more distance between us.
Yes, sir. New course 315. Yes, sir.
And let's move this intercept circle over. Going perpendicular with the estimated course of the convoy. I don't want to be turning at the last second here. Oh man, this guy turned back to starboard and he's parallel with us now. Shit. Oh shit, we are under fire.
Yes, sir.
They've seen us. Whoa!
Periscope depth.
God damn. Periscope depth, get us down, down, down. Fucking freight trains coming past the bridge. We've got 2 escorts firing at us. Son of a bitch.
Yes, sir.
Well, the gamble did not pay off. They spotted us.
Current depth.
Oh man, that was a close one. We are lucky. Lucky, lucky, lucky to have avoided damage. Oops, not that guy. We'll put him down in Hogan's Alley. There, let's get some guys on the dive planes, and we will clear the bridge. You know what? We are legit under fire. Let's rack everybody out. General quarters, general quarters. Diving for Jesus now. We are at flank speed, getting away from that last point of contact. Now that means we got to clear the other watch stations off the main deck too. Now the reason I'm doing this is because the game engine, this is something that the real Fleetboat team was not able to correct because it's sort of something that's hardwired in. When the sub submerges, it removes the models of the men up on the bridge, but it considers them to be still up there. So if you take, say, machine gun fire or a bomb hit, and you have guys that are stationed up on the deck, even if you're underwater, they can still be killed or wounded from it. So that's why they added this whole Hogan's Alley and recommend the rigging for depth charging by moving your watch standers into the dive planesman positions. There, we'll dash and drift a little bit, bump it down to head 1/3, rigging for silent running. Oh, there's a man here with no shirt on. Let's turn those off. That's the damage control crew, by the way. We don't need them animated. The guy's ass in my face, so we'll just turn them off until we need them. Here's the destroyers up on the surface. Searchlights ablaze. They are looking for us. They're gonna head to the last known position. And they're probably listening on their hydrophones. Near sound contact. Slow screws. Bearing 143. So yeah, it's that guy behind us there on our aft starboard quarter. Oh shit, there it is. Let's select follow nearest warship contact. We're at periscope depth. I'm bringing up the attack scope. Let's see just how close these guys are. Alright, there's a guy out at my starboard side. Give me a couple more feet to work with here, please. Scope is useless if I'm inside of a wave all the time.
Warship bearing 9-8 closing.
Contact. 092.
Warship closing. Bearing.
Okay, so that's the line. Okay, so that's a third escort cutting across the bows of the merchant ships coming right towards us. There's our troop transport at 090 degrees, so directly out to our starboard side. Nearest contact 097. But this guy is... he is beating feet right towards us. He's got a bone in his teeth. Huge bow wake coming up. Let's take another measurement on this guy. Estimated 6 knots, 286 degrees. That seems a little more plausible. So I think what I'm going to do, we've got that reading now. We're tracking it on the TDC. The TDC should, if we enter the information right, keep tracking him. So we'll go deep, go down under these escorts, and then hopefully come up on the other side, maybe in range for a torpedo shot. Oh, jeez. Sonar hits are coming faster. Less space in between. That means they're getting closer, and they are... somebody's tracking right on us.
Current depth 80. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Uh-oh. Sonar has stopped. That might mean that he is making an
Bearing
attack run.
4-2, long range. Yes, sir.
Ahead
We're
1/3.
listening for splashes. Nothing yet. Sonar far in the distance. Oh! This guy is right above us.
Yes, sir. New course 3-5.
We're now
Yes, sir.
slightly
Ahead, slow.
right up to 2/3. We gotta stay small. Keep us nice and quiet, but try to maneuver out of this guy's track. We're at 140 feet.
Current depth 140.
They're close, but whatever's going on up there, they do not have a clear picture of where we are. Two, three destroyers up on the surface, circling in a very tight area.
Contact! Warship! Moving away! Bearing! 2-3, long
But
range.
nobody has dropped charges yet. Meanwhile, keeping an eye on those gray lines. That's my sonar man telling me where the merchant ships are still. They're pretty far away. So if they are only doing 6 knots, let's take a tight right turn here and maybe
New course 3.
parallel their course
Yes, sir.
opposite. Let's get on a reciprocal course.
Warship! Closing! Bearing! 140.
140's back here. Oh, and I can hear their collision alarms going off right over us.
Warship! Bearing! 1.
Give me an extra
Yes, sir.
50 feet. Let's go
Closing.
right down to test depth.
190. Warship! Bearing! 149. Closing!
I hear their screws, but they're not making an attack run.
Bearing! 150.
Oh. That's full
Yes,
power.
sir.
Get us out from under this guy. Flank speed. Splashes in the water. Depth charge is coming
Warship,
down.
Bearing 150. Closing.
Brace for impact.
Passing thermal layer.
Start the timer.
Current depth 18.
Stuff further out too. Those were above us, so luckily we're close down to 200 feet now. We added a bunch of feet, maybe went underneath them. Flank speed. I've started the timer because
Yes,
once...
sir. Snorkel depth.
Oop, that's not what I wanted to do. Stop, stop, stop.
Rudder. New depth.
Jeez, I hit the wrong button for freaking radar depth. Once depth charges go off, the sea reverberates with the noise of that for a significant amount of time after. So we can use that to our advantage to run at flank speed and make a ton of noise for a short dash. And I usually use about 60 seconds from the last explosion. It might be longer, and it might actually change with different sea conditions, but as a rule of thumb, I stick with a minute, and then we come back to quiet, rig for silent running at 1/3,
Closing.
see if they can pick us up again.
Long range. Yes, sir.
Ahead 1/3.
Another ship closing out at 084 to the right.
Yes, sir.
Again, listening
Course 7-1.
for the high-speed screws of an attack run. We're down here at 190. We can go underneath test depth if I need to.
Warship closing. Bearing.
But I try to avoid violating the engineering safety margin if I can avoid it.
Yes, sir. Ahead slow. Contact. Warship moving away. Bearing.
Nearest contact is moving away now, dead ahead. 347.
Warship closing. Bearing. 347. Long range.
Oh no, now they're closing at 347. So we have like 4 ships up there. 3 or 4 ships. Escorts, I mean.
Contact.
Yeah,
Warship.
there's 4 ships
closing.
right there. Our
Bearing.
merchantmen are continuing on their way.
5. Long range.
We gotta track them down. We're almost through our turn. We are within 1,000 yards of their estimated track. Crossing at short range 131. Back into the right again. If we can avoid these escorts just long enough to pop up to periscope depth, we could crack off a couple of shots and then dive back down. I'm up at a head 2/3 to keep us at 2 knots through the turn, otherwise we'll just wallow at 1 knot with the rudder hard over. And I don't want that, I want to keep moving.
Contact. Warship closing. Bearing. 8-9. Long range.
Somebody's right on top of us. Ahead
Yes, sir.
flank!
Ahead flank!
Possible attack run, let's just get out of the way.
Rudder. Rudder.
Straighten the rudder, go straight and fast.
Bearing. 3. Set. Long range.
Wow, it is busy up there. I think that's a good thing. It looks like they're getting in each other's ways. I think they're sort of fouling their own
Yes,
attacks
sir.
up.
Ahead 1/3.
Back down to 1/3. Merchantmen are coming, they're getting pretty close. Let's take a couple more degrees. Looks like 15 or 20 degrees maybe, to get us on a parallel course.
Yes, sir. New course. 7-0.
And we got to think about coming
Yes, sir.
back up to periscope depth soon.
Bearing. 2-9. Long range. Bearing. 4. Set. Long range.
Just listening. What does the sound man have to say? Slow screws crossing, bearing 276 short range, so just off our port side. Right above us. Those are full, though those were full power engines, now they're slowing down. Alright, let's lower the rudder deflection so that we get a little more speed, but still keep turning. So we'll do 10 degrees of rudder to the right. $7:26 at night.
Yes, sir. Rudder. Rudder.
That's close enough.
Yes, sir.
We're basically parallel, while still moving slightly in on them. Let's move our intercept circle. What's the matter? I can't... Oh, I guess I can't adjust the size of it. I'll have to redraw a second one.
Yes, sir. Rudder. 9. Yes, sir.
What's our nearest contact? Slow screws crossing 291 short range. So out in front of us.
Bearing. 349. Long range.
Forward port quarter. This little guy, yeah, he's right in front of us.
Yes, sir. Periscope depth.
And that troop ship target is coming right up on us, so we're gonna chance it. Let's move back
Yes,
up
sir.
to periscope depth.
Rudder.
Straighten out the rudder. We're at ahead 1/3. We're still in silent mode. Let's just drift up to the surface. And then we'll have to reassess our target from there. In fact, let's turn over to the left.
8. Long range.
Let's head due north.
Yes, sir. New course. 0. Ahead, yes, sir.
Passing thermal layer.
Yes, sir. New depth.
We're back up
4.
over the top of that thermal layer. So we may be easier to hear now. Thermal layers are a temperature gradient in the water, and they work to our benefit, because if we're underneath them, they actually bend sound, and it makes it much more difficult for escorts using both active and passive sonar to detect exactly where we are. They get false readings. So we've been under that now for a bunch of this, which is maybe why they're confused, but we can't just let these targets get away simply because there's a couple of annoying escorts up there. Let's see if we can get in line with this juicy target that I want. Looks like they're zigzagging now as well, which is... Well, there's pros and cons to that. It slows down their overall speed, but obviously you have a much more difficult target to account for. I try to negate that by getting in as close as possible and making sort of the ideal 700-yard shot. Not always possible, though. Sometimes you gotta fire from further away. We are in super close with these guys, though. We're actually at 50 feet. We're at periscope depth, and I think... Oh, I just heard depth charges somewhere. The second gray line is just parallel with us, and that was... that troop ship was the second ship in line. Ah, no. Son of a bitch. Whoa, more depth charges far away. They think we're over there. That is great, and that just bought us some more time. Shit, well, that ship I wanted is behind us. God damn it, what's this? Some sort of tanker. Is it that large modern? Yeah, let's call it that. Draft of 30 feet, 29 and a half.
Yes, sir.
Ahead 1/3.
Rudder.
Let's straighten out. Opening. Tube 1. Let's set the depth at 20, so we'll actually give it a nice margin of 10. In case something goes wrong, we'll set all 4. We are doing this on the fly here. This is our first... Jesus Christ, stuff's going off behind me. Let's see, estimate it's about 80 90 degrees.
Yes, sir. New course. 3, 2, 6. Yes, sir.
Oh, shit. TDC has shown that we do not have a good angle on this thing. I don't think we're going to get a shut off at this either. Look, it's going to be coming in from its, like, aft quarter. Also, keep in mind that we only have that 90-degree deflection on our Mark 10 torpedoes, which we are rapidly approaching. We're at 80 degrees now. Son of a bitch. I don't think we're going to get a shot off with this guy. Let's drop the scope just for a minute so that no one can spot us. Flank speed, bring the nose around right into the path of these ships. We're going to maybe target whatever was behind that tanker, which I think was some sort of cruiser. Or maybe we can still line up on the tanker. We'll see. You can see we are just close. Now this is knife fight distances. And I'm losing targets because they are sailing by. This guy's still at 90 degrees, but he is rapidly approaching my 9 o'clock. Let's try to estimate a target speed. They're saying 8 knots. Oh, look at the target track. It's just doing something bizarre. I think it's a lost cause. It says the range is only 6,500 yards, but... No, now it's estimating 10 knots. Oh, and he's zagging away. Alright, you know what? Definitely lost cause. Let's move on. What do we got? Got a couple of merchantmen back there. We got some sort of possibly light cruiser here. You know what? Let's... Fuck it. This guy's right here. What is this guy? Let's look. Alright, something with 4 stacks. And a large superstructure out in the back. Maybe a seaplane thing. Come on, come on, come on. Oh, what's this? Naka? Light cruiser? Or Kuma? No, it's a Naka. 4 stacks. Seaplane rigging out in the back. That's her. Talk about shooting from the hip. Okay, going from the top of the stacks. 540 yards. We gotta estimate, let's just call it 40 degrees. Torpedo settings. Tube 1 is still open. Depth is set. Let's take one more reading to see if the calculations are holding up. TDC is estimating impact totally perpendicular. Now is the time. Tube 1 away. 5 degrees offset. Switching to tube 2. Let's back it off to 0 degrees. Firing. Over to tube 3 now. Let's readjust.
Torpedo in the water.
Give it a couple degrees. Over to the right. Torpedo impact! Right in the bow! Yes! Tube 3 is away now. They are pouring on the coal. Look at that. They've taken a hit, but they are getting out of Dodge.
Yes, sir. New course. 3, 2, 7. Yes, sir.
Centering everything. We have 2 more torpedoes streaking out there. Look at that. He is flying away, though. We're probably gonna miss with those other 2, but we got a solid hit right on the bow. Whoa! Torpedo impact! Another one! Look at that! I cannot believe that hit! Holy shit, he maneuvered right into it!
Yes, sir. Ahead slow.
Alright, let's look at the tubes here. Get this thing out of the way. Secure from silent running. We've got 1 in the chamber. Start reloading those other 3 tubes. Look at that. She's starting to go nose down. We've done damage to this NOCTA. Tube 4 is open. Actually reopened it by accident. Here's the merchantmen coming up on us fast. Maybe if we can get those reloads up, we can put some more into them. Oh yeah, look, she is going nose down. Maybe we can put one more torp into her and sink this NOCTA light cruiser.
Yes, sir. New course 270. Yes, sir.
Alright, let's grab some depth
Yes, sir.
and reassess what's going on
Ahead station.
before we make any more moves.
Dive.
Oh, look at this. She is sinking fast. I don't think she's going to need another torpedo. I think 2 have done the trick. Decks are awash already. And a magazine just exploded. She's exploding up top. Yes! Wow, our first kill is a warship. That's very unusual.
Bearing 3, 2,
Yes, sir.
2.
Oh,
Long
down
head,
she
1
goes. Screws out of the water. The entire front of the ship is completely submerged. That's it. We got this kill. Confirmed. Definitely not my prettiest setup. That sort of went to hell in a handbasket. But, luckily I'm pretty good at shooting from the hip. So we just recalibrated and fired at this guy instead. And we were able to slam him with 2 torpedoes. And the water here must be fairly shallow because I think she's hitting the bottom. Okay, meanwhile, here we are, just being a hole in the ocean. Just keeping low, trying to get those torpedoes reloaded. We got escorts spread all over creation out here. It's actually not just behind us to the southeast. Look, there's a whole line of stuff out beyond to the north. There must have been a whole ring of escorts around this convoy. Looks like 2 more gray lines out to my right. Alright, dudes, let's head back up to the surface and reassess.
Yes, sir. New depth 4, 4. Ahead slow.
How soon till torpedo 1? We're at 79% reloaded, so that actually won't be too long. By the time we maneuver around a little bit, we should have 2 torpedoes locked and loaded. So I want to continue this left turn and come around to the north side of the estimated track of the convoy. Now we'll really parallel their course and maybe let the ships behind us pass us by and then be in the perfect position for a close parallel shot. Now we're just coming up on periscope depth right now. Scope is coming up. Let's take a gander.
6. Long range.
We got a totem pole out there at 290. Oh, we got a merchantman right here, right in front of us. Just a couple of 100 yards away. Where's the one behind it? Nope, that's an escort. That's another escort. There's another escort. This is behind us now. Bearing 200. That's that same area that they've been trolling for us for the last 15 minutes or so. Alright, we're still coming around onto course. Coming up to speed. Somebody is pinging away now. Look at that! You can see the ring of escorts. Actually moving in very close behind us now, but you can see the ring out in front, too. So this is sort of bad, because they're going to be moving in behind us. They might detect us. I don't think there's any way we're going to get a shot on him. There's one more merchantman behind us. Although, if he's zigzagging at flank speed, maybe we can catch up. Let's just ID him anyways. What are we looking at here? We got composite freighter, draft of 27.5 feet. Actually bearing 340.
Yes, sir. New course 23. Yes, sir.
So he's coming onto the nose pretty fast here. Let's get some more readings. Maybe set up a possible firing solution on him. Ugh. Head-on or stern shots while they're zigzagging are tricky, but not impossible. Sometimes you just gotta estimate, fire ahead of where they're gonna be, lead them into the turn, and you can catch them, but...
Bearing 289. Long range.
Well, the navigator seems to think that they're still doing 8 knots at the moment. Compared to our 3, although we are in a turn. Supposedly we can do 9 knots submerged at flank speed once we're straight and level, so there is a possibility we can catch up to him. Somebody's pinging us with some veracity here. I think we have an escort close by. We're just going to keep working, and we're going to fire off some tubes here. Tube 1 is open. Here, we're going to estimate that he's at 180 because he's coming back. Tube 1, launch. He's got a 2 degree left. We're going to estimate over to the right here because he's making that turn. Give him a couple more degrees. Fire 4.
Torpedo in the water.
Test depth. Let's go. Get us down and under. And with an escort closing from some direction, down we go. Down scope. Passing 55 feet, and we'll make a 90-degree right turn at flank speed to get us away from where they might think we are.
Yes, sir. Current depth 60.
Oh, man. Another really messy, hectic shot. I'm just waiting. Are we going to get a contact? If it doesn't happen in the next couple of seconds, we're probably not going to get one. They were beyond 100 feet now. Severe nose down. And the pinging stopped. Are we about to get bombed? What's our nearest contact? 201 short range. That's right back there.
Contact. Warships. Moving away. Bearing 459. Long range.
God, are they right above us? Looks like we missed with those torpedoes. There we go. We're underneath the thermal layer again. That's going to help us a ton. No, that's right at 165 feet.
Bearing 3-4-8-5. Long range.
Oh shit, I think those were splashes. Rudder amidships, get us out of here.
Rudder
Oh, they just cut their engines. They are right above us.
Torpedo missed, sir.
Let's make another 90-degree right turn.
Yes, sir. New course, 0. Yes, sir. Torpedo missed, sir.
Okay, both torpedoes missed.
Yes, sir. Ahead slow.
Yeah, we're at 93% on tube 2, but...
Yes, sir. Rig for silent running. Yes, sir.
let's just cut our losses. We'll rig for silent running. Get clear of this convoy. I mean, we're right in the middle of it. If we can clear them up to the north, then we can swing around and maybe follow them at a distance on the surface and reload our torpedoes. And if we can get back in front of them over the course of the next day or so, then we might be able to make a second run, attack run on them.
Bearing 8, 9, long range.
But I think we're just going to be wasting torpedoes if we just keep punching from the center of it here. I just heard more depth charges out in the distance. Nearest contact, opening bearing 250, short range. So just off to our left rear quarter here. Still close though. Oh shit, we're actually getting close to that sunk cruiser. If it's still sitting straight up in the air, I don't want to crash into it. Let's make sure we can get through that turn without colliding with the Hulk. Ooh, that sounds like flank speed. Are they going to drop? Maybe not. They are very persistent in looking for us, but they are not able, they don't seem to be able to pin down exactly where we are.
Current depth 200.
Oh, we are close to the bottom.
Yes, sir.
Getting the warning that we're less than 50 feet below the keel here. So give me another 10 feet back. We'll go up to 190. Slow screws, bearing 012, short range, so out almost dead ahead of us now. They pass from the rear left to the front right. So right over the top of us. And luckily, no depth charges. So listen, I know that attack got really ugly, but you saw how fast the plans got shot to hell and changed, and I think for grabbing what we could out of an otherwise failing situation very rapidly, we nabbed a freaking light cruiser, and I'm super proud of that. So even if that's the best that we can get out of this attack, with an S-boat sinking a warship like that, I mean, that's still something to hang our hat on and be proud of.
New course.
It would have been fun if we had pulled off a miracle shot with that second freighter, but sort of a long shot to begin with. So let's just disengage, because I don't want to get greedy at this point. I'm just going to try to head out of the circle of escorts until we can surface, and then we can regroup and either try to pursue this convoy or radio ahead back to headquarters, and maybe they can send some other assets to intercept them. If it's a landing force, They still have destroyers, but I assumed that that cruiser was maybe coming along for fire support. So those are shells that are not going to be fired at the Philippines now because they're down under 250 feet of water. The escort search pattern seems to just be getting wider and wider. They have no clue where we are. Look at the searchlights all over the ocean. But the nearest depth charges have been way back in that original area that we dove in when we were under gun attack. According to the sonar lines, looks like the majority of the escorts are actually past us, or passing us out to the west. So I'm just coming around to the north here. We'll keep an eye on them, but I want to try to move away. We'll cut the rudder down to get some speed back. Make a hasty exit. The time is now 8:06 in the evening. We've completed our mission objectives of sink the IGN units, although we have not completed our primary mission yet of completing that patrol.
Ahead 1/3.
Yes, sir. Periscope depth.
Let's pop back up to periscope depth and see what we can see.
Passing thermal layer.
There's the thermal layer again at 158 feet. Okay, so we've swung around to the west. We've come back up to periscope depth. Scope is coming up. Let's see, we've reloaded tubes 1 and 2. 3 is underway. There's the totem pole cruiser out way behind us with 3 escorts still looking for us. They are awfully far away, and scanning the horizon here, I don't see... no, I don't see anybody else. There's the last remnants of the rest of the convoy way out in front of us. They're nearly out of visual range, if they're not already. I can barely see anything now in the murk. So, just these handful of ships here. And they're not looking in our direction at all, so I'm standing by to surface and go up to full or flank speed.
Tube 3 ready, sir.
Surface the boat.
Yes, sir.
Let's air this pig out. We got to get the watch teams back up onto their positions on deck.
Surface.
And send the dive plane's been up as we order flank speed to open up that distance even more from those remaining ships. Yeah, we'll just go over the top. Sometimes the sailors drop off the pointer, even if you're holding the button, and then switch with someone else, which is annoying. So there we go. We are remanned. Lookouts back up top, and I just want to open the distance now. Let's get up to 13 knots and get away from... Whoa, that was a big eyeball. Get away from these sub-chasers over there. Let's make a gentle right turn and put them to our stern.
Yes, sir. Rudder. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Rudder. Rudder. Yes, sir.
Alright, I think we're in safe enough waters. Let's secure from battle stations.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Relieve the watch. Battle stations.
And we get to relieve the watch. Bosun call in there as well, because the previous watch team was way over. But, well, I guess not way over. They were kept on about 30 minutes after their watch. So now Group 3 is on. Group 1 turning in for the night. So let's just clear out of here. I'm going to set up another patrol route. And let's just head back out on that. And I'm going to radio headquarters, give them an update, and with any luck they can send some assets out to intercept that convoy. What is this? There's moonlight reflecting off the water. Where is the moon? I don't actually see it. Son of a bitch, this could explain why those escorts saw us. Besides the bow wake, whatever this reflection is coming from, we would have been right in the middle of it. Son of a bitch. That might be a piece of the puzzle as to how they spotted us in the dark, because it might not have been as dark as I thought it was. Well, no matter now. Too late. We survived the fight. That's the most important thing. And we got a kill, and that's the second most important thing. And we still have torpedoes left, so there is still more tonnage to claim if luck presents another opportunity. So, I think that's going to wrap it up for this really, really long episode 1. Thanks for sticking with me this whole time. If you're still here, maybe you've watched it in a couple of sittings, I don't know, that's allowed. But we're going to wrap it up here. This is the end of episode 1. Come back next time for episode 2 as we continue our patrol up here just off the Lingayen Gulf. We'll see if we can find one more juicy target out here before we have to head back to port for the end of this first patrol. Okay, hopefully. We'll see you then.